You're listening to Full Circle Weekly News. These articles are compiled by Archeon Reddy, and I'm your host, Moss Bliss. This is episode 379, covering week 32, August 5th to 11th, 2024. The GNU BinUtils 2.43 set of system utilities is out, which includes programs such as GNU Linker, GNU Assembler, NM, OBJDump, DLL Tool, ReadELF, Size, Strings, and Strip. The project is also developing the debug-infod service for dynamically loading debugging symbols from an external server. Nitrux 3.6.0 is out, built on Debian, KDE Technologies, and the OpenRC init system. The project offers its own NX desktop, which is an add-on to KDE Plasma. It is based on the Maui library, where a set of standard user applications are being developed for the distribution that can be used on both desktop systems and mobile devices. The distro recommends app images for additional apps. The project's code is distributed under free licenses. The NX desktop offers a different style, its own implementation of the system tray, notification center, and various plasmoids, such as a network connection configurator and a multimedia applet for adjusting the volume and controlling the playback of multimedia content. Applications built using the Maui Kit framework include the Index File Manager, the Note Text Editor, the Station Terminal Emulator, the vVave Music Player, the Clip Video Player, the NX Software Center, and the Pix Image Viewer. Vortex 2.2 project has been published, developing an open GPGPU based on the RISC-V instruction set architecture, designed to perform parallel computing using the OpenCL API and the single instruction multiple threads execution model. The project can also be used in research in the field of 3D graphics and in the development of new GPU architectures. The scheme's descriptions of hardware blocks in Verilog language, simulator, drivers, and accompanying design documentation are distributed under the Apache 2.0 license. The core of GPGPU is a generic RISC-V ISA, enhanced with some additional instructions needed to support GPU functionality and thread control. At the same time, changes in the RISC-V instruction set architecture are kept to a minimum and, whenever possible, existing vector instructions are used. The evolving GPGPU supports 32 and 64-bit RISC-V RV32IMF and RV64IM AFD instruction set architectures and can include optional shared memory, L1, L2, and L3 caches, and a configurable number of cores, warps, and threads. In turn, each core has the ability to include a configurable number of ALUs, FPUs, LSUs, and SFUs. FPGAs that can be used for prototyping are Altera Aria 10, Altera Stratix 10, Xilinx Alveo U50, U250, U280, and Xilinx Versal VCK 5000. Verilator, RTLSIM, and SimX can be used to simulate the operation of the chip. A toolkit is offered for application development, including variants of POCL, LLVM/Clang, GCC, and BinUtils adapted for working with Vortex. The project supports the OpenCL 1.2 specification and, through translation to OpenCL, the intermediate representation of SPIR-V shaders. An OpenGPU Skybox is being developed that supports the Vulkan Graphics API. The Skybox prototype, based on the Altera Startix 10 FPGA and including 32 cores, 512 threads, made it possible to achieve a fill performance of 3.7 gigapixels per second at a frequency of 230 megahertz. The JavaScript library Puppeteer 23 is out, designed to automate the testing and management of web browsers. The library is suitable for automatically performing standard operations of the browser, as well as for testing browsers and simulating user work. The project code is written in TypeScript using Node.js and is distributed under Apache 2.0 license. Puppeteer allows you to create a script that launches the browser, sets the desired window size, opens a specific page, sets focus on a given search field, enters data into the field, and sends a request, then follows a link to the first result in the list and saves the resulting page. The library also provides capabilities for downloading the latest version of the selected browser, simulating the selected hardware device, for example a Pixel 5 smartphone, and processing authentication forms. In the process, you can monitor, intercept, modify, or block network requests and responses, as well as manipulate HTTP headers and execute your scripts in the context of the pages being opened. The release of Puppeteer 23 is notable for providing official support for the Firefox browser, in addition to natively supporting browsers browsers based on the Chromium Blink engine. The Chrome DevTools and WebDriver BT protocols are supported for interaction with browsers. By default, browsers launch in headless mode. It is noted that the stabilization in the new version of support for Firefox and WebDriver BT allows using Puppeteer as a universal tool for automating testing of web applications in different browsers. System 76 has unveiled the first alpha release of the Cosmic desktop environment written in Rust. 2 ISO images with Cosmic were generated for systems with NVIDIA and Intel/AMD GPUs, built on a test build of the Pop! OS 24.04 distribution. Pre-built packages are also available for Fedora, NixOS, Arch Linux, and SerpentOS. The shell is being developed as a universal project, meeting the free desktop specifications. To build the interface, Cosmic uses the ICE library, which uses safe types, modular architecture, and a reactive programming model, and also offers an architecture recognizable to developers familiar with the Elm Declarative Interface building language. Multiple rendering engines are provided, supporting Vulkan, Metal, DX12, OpenGL 2.1+, and OpenGL ES 2.0+. Developers are offered a ready-made set of widgets, the ability to create asynchronous handlers, and use adaptive layout of interface elements depending on the size of the window and screen. The project is also developing a composite server, Cosmic Comp, based on Wayland. The alpha release marked the completion of a minimum core set of features that define a working project suitable for everyday use, and is the basis for final honing of functionality and improved usability, taking into account feedback received from users. Distributions are given the opportunity to create customized versions of Cosmic, supplied with their own color scheme, applets, settings, and themes. The Libre CUDA project is developing an open implementation of the CUDA driver API, which allows you to run CUDA code on NVIDIA GPUs without using the proprietary CUDA runtime. Operation without runtime is achieved by directly accessing the hardware using driver-provided IOCTL calls and manipulating the command queue via memory-mapped I/O. The project code is written in C and distributed under the MIT license. The project is still in an early stage of development and is marked as not ready for use in production systems. Features include support for loading CUDA executable files in ELF format into the GPU, launching CUDA kernels through a command queue, allocating and freeing memory in the GPU, as well as mapping GPU memory for access from code executed on the CPU. The Canonical Kernel team announced changes to the Linux kernel version selection process for upcoming Ubuntu releases. It was decided to supply the distribution with the latest Linux kernel at the time of release. Accordingly, stabilization and preparation of kernel packages and the process of preparing new versions of Ubuntu can now be carried out not only on assemblies of an existing kernel release, but also on the basis of published release candidates. Until now, the kernel version for the next Ubuntu release was chosen based on the stable kernel release that already existed at the time of functionality of the future Ubuntu release was frozen. Taking into account the fact that new kernel branches are formed every 2 to 3 months, a situation often arose when the previous kernel branch was included in the Ubuntu release, despite the publication of a new stable branch shortly before the Ubuntu release, which caused dissatisfaction among users who wanted to get the latest kernel with up-to-date functionality and hardware support. The new version selection process allows the selection of a kernel that is in the Ubuntu feature freeze phase, accepting changes or early release candidates. To approve the kernel version by the time the beta version is formed, about a month before the release of Ubuntu, the kernel must be at the release stage or late release candidates, RC4 and later. In the latter case, the kernel release will be released shortly before the release of Ubuntu, and the package with the kernel for Ubuntu will be tested based on preliminary versions. Ubuntu 24.10 plans to ship the 6.11 kernel, which is expected to be released at the end of September. The developers of the experimental Ladybird browser have announced their intention to use the Swift programming language as the main language for their project. Inclusion in Swift code is planned to begin in the fall after the release of Swift 6. Thanks to the ability to combine code in C++ and Swift, Swift will be implemented gradually without rewriting existing code. Swift was chosen due to a number of advantages, including memory-safe practices, protection against race conditions, modern syntax, and ergonomics. Of particular importance to the Ladybird team is Swift's object-oriented nature, which allows it to more accurately model web specifications and browser internals. The developers also note improving Swift support for non-Apple platforms and active work on compatibility with C++, which paves the way for the gradual introduction of the language into the project. Despite Swift's historical ties to Apple, the language is becoming increasingly independent, as evidenced by moving its repository to a separate organization on GitHub. Andreas Kling, founder of the Ladybird project, shared his thoughts on Rust. According to Kling, Rust is less suitable for developing long-lived programs with large complex object graphs. Additionally, Kling described the Rust community as, quote, toxic, end quote. The first working port of the Firefox browser has been prepared for Haiku OS. The port is not yet suitable for the average user, as it has not yet been fully tested and is not stable enough. Ready-made installation builds are not published. Those who want to test Firefox in Haiku are encouraged to build from source code. Until now, Haiku has offered WebPositive, Epiphany, and Falcon browsers, which have been difficult to use due to some content delivery networks on large websites being too suspicious of them. According to one of the Haiku developers, BOS enthusiasts were among the inspiration for the creation of Firefox. At that time, within the framework of the Beezilla project, a port of the Mozilla Suite package for the BOS OS was being developed. Since the package was too bloated, the BOS community tried to create a lightweight version of it, which left only the browser and removed all other components such as the email client and web page editor. Developers from Mozilla considered the idea worthy of attention and released their own standalone version of the browser under the name Phoenix, later renamed Firebird due to overlap with the trademark, and then again renamed Firefox due to overlap with the name of the free DBMS. You've been listening to Full Circle Weekly News. For more details, see the next issue of the magazine at fullcirclemagazine.org or check the links in the show notes. You can contact me at bardmoss@pm.me. I'll see you next week.